I'm Jeff Shumlin. I'm one of the co-directors of Putney Student Travel, and it's great to see you here. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by one of my colleagues, Bob Pokorny, who has organized and led Putney programs for probably 20 years now, and I'll talk a bit more about him in a moment. And by Professor Jim Basker, who is really the driving force behind our academia programs. He has many, many decades of experience creating extraordinary educational experiences internationally and at home for young people. And it's great to have you both here today. And Jim as well, I'll introduce you in a little more detail in a moment. This is going to be a pretty brief presentation. I bet it will take us maybe 20 minutes to get through the presentation, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes to answer your questions if there are any after that. I guess what I'll do is talk a little bit about our history at Putney Student Travel. This picture on the left is sort of where we are today. This was taken back in October, and I'm on the right in the back, and my brother Peter, my co-director, is on the left. Peter and I are the second generation of Shumlins to direct Putney Student Travel. It was founded by our parents, George and Kitty Shumlin, 71 years ago. You see Kitty in the middle here. She turned 91 last week and is going strong, still calls every day to make sure that we've got this ship on the straight and narrow. She is a force of nature. She and our father, who sadly is no longer with us, were educators when they met in 1950. He was a teacher here in Vermont, and our mother is Dutch. And it was the classic post-war love story where they met on a ship crossing the Atlantic. My mother's father had been worried after the war, ironically, that the Russians were going to come into Northern Europe and take over, and sent his daughters to Canada to study where they would be safe. And she was coming home for summer vacation when she met our father on the boat. He was headed for an internship in Oxford, oddly enough, focusing on Shakespeare that summer. And of course they fell in love, and the rest is history. You also have in the photo Olivia and Rebecca Shumlin, my brother's daughters, my nieces, who have been with us for 3 or 4 years now and represent the third generation of Shumlin family at Putney Student Travel. And if you look carefully at Olivia's tummy, you can see that she was very close to delivering little Max, who joined us in November and will probably become the 4th generation of Putney. We work out of the barn that you see in the lower right hand of your screen on an old dirt road in remote Vermont. We love to have visitors. If you can find us, it's not easy to do. We have a quart of maple syrup ready for you at the door. We are about 30 some people who work out of that barn, including Mike and Bob and others. Peter, my brother, I should mention, took a leave of absence from Putney Student Travel for 7 or 8 years while he served for 3 terms as Vermont's governor. So we have a variety of experience under our roof, and just an extraordinary group of people. I guess what I'll do is not focus too much on everything else we do in the world, because you're probably familiar with Putney Student Travel, but instead head us towards this academia group of programs that really are directed and inspired by Jim Basker, who's with us today. Jim is himself the product of the British university system. He started at Harvard, but has also studied at Cambridge and Oxford. He is himself a Rhodes Scholar. He serves on the alumni committee of the Rhodes Scholarship and is in fact a member of the selection committee for the Rhodes Scholar as well. He is steeped in the British educational tradition. He is a professor at Columbia Barnard, a professor of history, and the director of the Gilder Lehrman Institute of History, which is doing extraordinary things, bringing history into the lives of young people across the United States. You should all go look at their website. It is amazing what Jim is doing. I think it's safe to say, though, that he saves his greatest energy and passion for turning on young people to the academic tradition that he himself experienced through his studies. He started a program 35 years ago now at Oxford and then elsewhere around the world called Oxbridge, and directed it for over 3 decades. Jim and Oxbridge have headed off in different directions, but he came to us a few years ago and said, you know, I really miss doing this. And I love the way Putney runs programs. And we had also conducted all sorts of programs for decades and decades in places like Oxford and Paris, and asked us if we wanted to collaborate with him. And in view of his extraordinary network of contacts in the academic world, we of course jumped at the occasion to do this. And it has been just an extraordinary, inspiring experience to work with Jim and see the breadth of his knowledge and contacts in the academic community in Paris, in Oxbridge, in Oxford, around the world. So this new opportunity has been pretty extraordinary. Jim, do you want to just say a few words about sort of your background and how you come to this? And
thanks, Jeff.
I'll just say that this is your great passion.
This is a great opportunity just to say a few words about the program, and I know I'll talk about some courses later, but as you say, I've been a career academic for almost 40 years. I've been building programs in Oxford and Paris and other parts of Europe since the 1980s. I love this partnership with you guys at Putney, and already it's led us to kind of a new threshold because we're partners, as we'll be discussing in due course, with the American University of Paris, which really comes down to a personal connection. The president of the American University of Paris, Celeste Skank, is a very old friend, actually a former colleague at Columbia, who moved her career to France many decades ago and was some years ago, before she moved up the faculty at AUP, the director of my then Paris program in Paris. So she knows the kinds of programs, the kind of students we bring together very well. And she leapt at the chance to form this partnership with our program, which will be based on the campus of the American University of Paris, drawing on some of the academic intellectual resources of their faculty. It's just a brilliant opportunity for students to get the best of several worlds. And when we talk about the courses, I think that the students will see also the kind of special, life-changing academic experience that we're hoping to present to kids on this program this summer.
Thanks, Jim. I want to also introduce Bob Picorni. Bob graduated from Colorado College. Bob is an adventurer. There's no two ways about it. He has a master's degree from Middlebury in French, much of which he did at their program in Paris. In fact, he's lived in Paris on a number of occasions. And I think Bob told me when we were in Paris earlier this month for a week together that his grandmother or great-grandmother was perhaps the first woman to have her thesis accepted into the Panthéon in Paris. I mean, he has long-term French roots. While we were I mentioned that Bob is an adventurer. While we were in Paris, Bob insisted that every movement we made was conducted by Vélib, which is the public bike program in Paris. And rain or shine, night or day, we did it all by bicycle, including riding to the top of Montmartre one night to meet one of Jim's colleagues, Alexis, who is a professor at the Sorbonne, and then come flying down off that hill in the dark in probably 30-degree weather without gloves. Bob is joining us today, I think, from Taos Mountain in New Mexico, and I'm going to imagine he's probably got his ski boots on underneath what we see here now. Bob, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about American University and what the facilities are like and what makes this experience really extraordinary in that way?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. You know, I thought I had really known just about every neighborhood in Paris really well until Jeff and I visited AUP's campus not that long ago. And we were both just blown away by this really academic community in a quiet but really well-known as far as monuments and such corner of Paris. So in the 7th arrondissement, AUP is a collection of about a half a dozen wonderfully appointed and diverse buildings between the Invalides and the river. As you walk from building to building, Jeff and I noticed, we would see students talking in small groups, maybe carrying their folios and heading from building to building between classes. It's never more than a 3 or 4 or 5 minute walk between AUP's buildings. So you really get a sense that it's an intellectual community, which was really surprising for us. It's very, it has a great feel. The buildings themselves at AUP have recently been overhauled. And what you see on this slide here is a great representation of this mix of kind of Haussmann Parisian exteriors with really advanced classroom space on the inside. So small, 12 to 15 seats, kind of a seminar style in each classroom. Each one has AV equipment and is really well appointed. But more than that, there's this feel, like I said, of intellectual curiosity there. And I think our students are really going to pick up on that. The housing is what you see on the next slide, which incredibly is on the Champs-Élysées about midway down on the way to Étoile, in this amazing and private pair of buildings with a central courtyard that you see at the upper right. I think many of us on this call probably didn't have freshman dorms that look much like this. I think it's safe to say there are these really well-appointed, very modern rooms, apartments really, that have baths and full kitchens and laundry. And some look out on the Eiffel Tower, but more than that, it's a really secluded and quiet place for our students who are going to be busy all day to come home to and really reflect on what they've done all day and spend time together and meet up, with their classmates in a great space for reflection. So I can't say enough about the location. We're really lucky to be there. It's a spectacular
Bob, did you take
place.
that picture of the Eiffel Tower from one of the rooms? Because I remember seeing that view.
I did. I
Yeah.
did. That is a picture from one of the upper levels looking out on the Eiffel Tower. It's really an inspiring place to be. You see here on the next slide sort of where the campus is located. As you can see, they're all pretty close. What you don't see on there are, the handful of embassies that are there. So in the cafes, you hear Arabic, you hear Spanish, you hear French, of course. And it's really a interesting part of the city that's going to be great for our students.
Yeah, if I can talk a bit about the neighborhood, because you do see it sort of laid out here. The 7th arrondissement is the absolute heart of Paris. You'll see that it says the Quai d'Orsay right up by numbers 1 and 2. And AUP has done an extraordinary job of sort of playing monopoly and buying these buildings in the neighborhood, such that building number 1, for example, is off of the Rue Colonel Combes, and 2 is on the Quai d'Orsay, and they've broken down the wall in between so that you can go in from one side and out the other. And on the Quai d'Orsay, they have a wall of glass looking out over the river. It is amazing. And if you go out and go to the right, just past the Invalides, you're at the Musée d'Orsay. It is literally 2 big blocks away. The big gray area where it says Invalides on the right is the huge green esplanade that's in front of the Invalides. And over on the left by the Eiffel Tower, where you've got all that gray, that's the Champ de Mars, which is all a beautiful park. And those streets you see are actually walking paths. So that students on lunch break at the American University can grab a picnic in the Rue Claire, which is a market street that you see there in the middle, and go and have a picnic under the Eiffel Tower in the Champ de Mars, or over in the green part of the Invalides, or stop at a little cafe and have lunch or something along those lines. We've run a lot of academic programs in Paris over the years. In fact, Bob, I think you conducted one probably almost 20 years ago that used to combine 2 Paris with 2 weeks in Provence, in Aix-en-Provence, and it was terrific. But the big challenge that large programs like this face is finding good academic facilities and housing in the heart of Paris. There is nothing more that exemplifies the heart of Paris than the AUP. Within walking distance of the Louvre across the way, our housing is literally a 10 to 15 minute walk up the Avenue Georges V across the river to the Champs-Élysées. In the past, the challenges for big groups has always been, well, if you can find housing, it's out in a suburb and you've got, you know, a 30-minute commute back into all the sites you want to see, all the museums. And if you find it in town, it's probably in some student residence that hasn't been renovated in 200 years and has a lot of old world charm, but is a little bit grim. This is absolutely over the top housing. The facilities, as Bob says, are state of the art. And, you know, we've got the Musée Rodin just across the Invalides. We can walk to the Panthéon, the Luxembourg Gardens, the Senate, the Congress. It's all right there. It is just an absolutely amazing location to have a campus and is truly inspiring in and of itself. That said, I think it's important to say that Paris is as much a part of the campus as the American University of Paris is. We will use those facilities for class time, for seminar time, but we'll also be out visiting museums, visiting historic sites, going to the Panthéon to look for Bob's grandmother's manuscript. You know, all those great things are right there at our doorstep. And it's going to be really extraordinary to live this academic experience in the heart of Paris. You know, we have learned over the years that the best time to see the Pompidou Center is the evenings when it's open from 7 to 10 at night and no one else is there. The same can be done at the Louvre. It's not unlikely that a seminar focused on art history and culture will go out to Chartres Cathedral, where Malcolm Miller, a British scholar who is literally the top scholar on the stained glass in Chartres, gives us private visits, guided visits of the literature, the biblical stories that can be found in the stained glass windows. It will be very, very field-based. Bob, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the structure of the day, majors and minors and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. This slide is a perfect picture of what you know, some of these activities might look like. I think a day is going to follow the following structure pretty regularly. That's morning at our residence will have breakfast. Depending on the day, it might mean breakfast will happen on campus. AUP has this wonderful cafe that is right on campus where students can get breakfast if there's a speaker or a seminar that they need to get to. But the day is going to follow the following structure. So they're going to start out with a morning meeting. And this is important for our groups for a bunch of reasons, but really it's a way of bringing everyone together and talking about the plan for the day. This really, you know, this is going to be a larger group of students. And so this is a way for everyone to be kind of on the same page about what is going to come for the day. So from 9 to noon is a time when major seminars are going to meet. So this is going to be on campus if there is a lab that needs to take place on AUP. It might mean that there is a visit in the field somewhere in the city, but that's going to happen from 9 to 12, 3 hours of pretty focused work on campus or in the field. Lunch is going to happen every day at noon until 1 o'clock. And like Jeff said, this neighborhood in AUP has really just endless opportunities for students to sit down at a cafe and have a quick sandwich, or even better, get picnic items and sit by the river or on the Champ de Mars, and then join up again for class again from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. These classes in the afternoon will be either a continuation of their major study that happened in the morning, or 2 days a week, it might mean a minor class. So this is another opportunity for students to dig into a second subject that they're not focused on like their major. At about 3 o'clock, groups are going to take kind of a step away from their seminar and have an afternoon activity. So this might mean a speaker coming to chat with us about the immigrant experience in Paris, or the life of a sculptor in present day Paris versus in the 19th century. This might mean a workshop where students might try their hand at making cheese in our community kitchen or something like that, but a time for either exploration in the city or a focused workshop. At about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, typically, we really like to give our students time for reflection or to work on their independent projects. So this is maybe an hour or more in the afternoon, really to reflect on what they've done that day and maybe tie it into their final project. Dinner is going to happen in small groups at various restaurants that we know throughout the city. And the idea behind really exploring the city through food is such that, the groups are going to be eating in a lot of restaurants that are near our campus, but also exploring outer arrondissement and really getting the breadth of the city as the cosmopolitan place that it is. In the evenings we like to have evening programming. So this is a time, again, for speakers. As Professor Basker mentioned, his former colleague, the president of the school, someone like that might come and address our students at large and talk about a larger issue. It's important that students get enough rest on a program like this. So after our evening activities, typically, we head back to our campus and really rest for the rest of the evening.
Great, Bob.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
Courses. We have a full list of courses here on the screen, and maybe, Jim, this would be a good time, since many of these came right out of your brain, to just let you talk a bit about the kinds of seminars that we offer and what they look like. I do want to correct one thing Bob said, which is that the minor courses actually meet 3 afternoons a week. The major courses meet 6 mornings. We actually meet on Saturday morning as well.
Well, thanks, Jeff, and thank you, Bob. And as people have heard, this is one of the most extraordinary neighborhoods in Paris to be in residence, not only because it's genuinely an academic community, and I know that very personally because my older daughter did her bachelor's degree at the American University of Paris. I have spent a lot of time around that institution. I've eaten in those little restaurants. We've taken picnics to Invalides and to the Eiffel Tower and across the river. It is, as you say, very international, with embassies and with French government offices and cultural institutions. And it's a very elegant, upscale neighborhood as well. So it's just about everything one could hope for in Paris. But as you say, Jeff, there's an educational philosophy that lies at the heart of this curriculum. I did lay out many of these courses based on courses that I have seen succeed in the past. And they take advantage, as Bob suggests, of Paris as a classroom and a textbook in a way. So at the core of the philosophy of the program is that we want students to be able to do things they can't do in the classroom back home. So it would be crazy to confine kids to a classroom, 3 hours a day. Some of their work will always be out and about in Paris with guest speakers, workshops, visits to museums, projects that are done out and about. The key to the teaching is that we're not doing final exams, we're not doing long essays. We have teachers who use imaginative experiential methods to make France come alive in the imagination of our students, to make these subjects come alive. So a very good example of one of our teachers is Vanessa Lincoln, who has a PhD in history from Berkeley. She is a top flight intellectual herself, young. She has taught in the American University of Paris. She has taught for Sciences Po, one of the elite schools in France. She's done work for overseas American universities and so on. She knows how to make Paris live in the fields of art history and history. She's going to teach a course called History Secrets, which is typical of our approach, because we don't want to just do a chronological survey of European history. We want to use Paris as a kind of magic space in which history can come alive. So she'll be probing through different neighborhoods, different historic sites, questions, did the storming of the Bastille really give rise to the French Revolution, or did it have other and deeper roots and other flashpoints that made it happen? And how does the Musée d'Orsay exist as a symbol of the Industrial Revolution in France and its modernization, and now somehow survive as one of the leading art museums in the world? She's going to make the streets and buildings of Paris come alive with interesting probing questions that I think will give students interest in history as a lived experience that has bearing on where we are today. Many of the courses make available things students can't do at home. Exposure to business in an international sense, an entrepreneurial sense, or to law, not in a narrow grinding sense, but what are the opportunities in law, especially in fields like human rights and international law? Obviously, with today's events in the world, those are fields that are of more interest every day, I think, to students of the future. We're going to have a medicine course where students can explore medicine as a possible career, as a way of imagining, a life of service or a life of intellectual inquiry. So all of the courses are meant to make things available to kids that they can't really do and see in their normal high school program. We're going to have people like Vanessa Lincoln we're making available. We also try to bring in some of the leading intellectuals and creative people in Paris as guest speakers or as assistants in courses. So as you mentioned, Alexis Tadier, who's in the faculty of the Sorbonne, who's fluent in English and specializes in literature. He'll, when he does a guest talk, be able to make clear why Voltaire and Rousseau are truly the core of the Enlightenment, not just for France, but for all of modern Europe. Or a professor like Ziad Majed, whom I know very well and is one of the leading experts. He's originally from Lebanon, trilingual French, Arabic, and English, one of the most eloquent and insightful commentators on the clash of cultures between the Middle East and Europe and its historical dimensions and where things go from there, and also a brilliant and inspiring teacher. And Steve Sawyer, who's a professor of history at the American University of Paris, and other figures comparable who will open a window on some aspect of history or culture or life today in Europe that I think students couldn't get from any other source. I want to just round that out by saying with all of our teachers, we don't have a fixed curriculum. I mean, there'll be an opportunity for kids to take courses of their choice. They can major in art history and minor in French language. They can major in medicine and minor in history. They can combine an individual academic program or imaginative program that suits their personal preferences and their combination of motives. They may be exploring in one course. They may be trying to improve their French for a class in school in another. But in all of these, the instructors develop their plans for their course under a mandate that simply says this: their job is to have the students go away more excited about their subject than they were when they arrived. And we have teachers who are going to be doing that for students across the curriculum. So whatever courses students choose as their majors and minors, their imaginative and cultural experience is going to be truly exhilarating. I hope it will be in some ways a transformation in their lives. And I look forward to meeting the kids who are going to do that and under Bob's leadership have this extraordinary experience.
Terrific, Jim. Thank you. You made one distinction. I want to make two, actually. One is that each course that you see on this slide is offered in both major and minor form. So you can, in fact, combine any two as your major and minor. And then the other distinction I want to make is that most courses are offered in English, though we do offer French language at two different levels. We have an introductory French for people who just want to pick up some French while they're in France. And we have two advanced classes, one focused on history and culture of France and Paris, and the other focused on cuisine. So the cuisine course is offered in English, where we have professional people from the world of cooking teaching the course, and it's very hands-on. It's also in the kitchens of famous restaurants, in the gardens outside Paris where restaurants create their vegetables that they bring into their fancy menus and things like that. You can do that in French language for the most advanced students, or most advanced students can also do one focused on the museums and historical sites that Paris has to offer. And then there's the introductory French experience as well. Jim just mentioned that Bob is going to be the on-campus director. Bob has, as I said earlier, directed many of our programs and has tremendous experience in this. Susanna Poland will also be there as a dean. Susanna worked at Putney for many, many years. She has a degree in anthropology from Stanford and has led programs to France for Phillips Andover Academy in Massachusetts, and many, many programs for us at Putney Student Travel. Last year, she directed a writing program in Greece for us. For the past 3 years, she has worked for the King of Bhutan as the only foreign member of a team that is reorganizing the primary education curriculum in the Kingdom of Bhutan. And she's just returned to the States and will be continuing as part of her graduate studies work with her Bhutanese colleagues as she does a PhD at the University of Massachusetts. She knows France inside out, is fluent in French, and is just a terrific, wonderful person. And then Camille Jones will also be a dean. I tend to want to call her Camille because she is in fact French-American. Her mother is French. She grew up in the States, but spent all of her summers in France. She has a master's from NYU in French and teaches in New York at Nightingale Bamford School. Some of you may know her. She is extraordinarily well-versed in all that Paris has to offer and is an experienced teacher and administrator as well. We sort of touched on the schedule already. I think, Bob, the only thing I would add to what you said is that I think it's important for us to really be clear that the program provides a continental breakfast with a hot drink, yogurt, fruit, pain au chocolat, and croissant in the morning before our morning meeting, that students get lunch on their own in the neighborhood, either where their course is taking place or in the neighborhood around AUP. There are many bakeries, there's the Rue Claire Market Street, all of that. And then that we provide dinner, usually breaking the group up into 3 restaurants that they will rotate through. So one night they might be eating Korean, the next night Italian, the next night French, before we have an evening activity after dinner. I also want to be clear that there is a commute. This is an urban experience, but that it's a lovely commute between the dorms and the American University campus, heart of the campus. You literally cross the Seine on the Pont de l'Alma and walk about 4 blocks up the Avenue Georges V, which is an extremely elegant street with the Four Seasons Hotel on it. Very, very safe and lovely. You turn right on Rue Pierre Charon and go 2 blocks and you hit the Champs-Élysées, and our building is the first building on the left. We have passes. We're all enrolled in the American University of Paris, and we have AUP passes to get in, walk through a courtyard, which is under an office building, into this apartment building that we take over the entire thing of. And they range from suites of 6 or 8 people to an apartment to apartments of 4 or 5, all of which have a private kitchen and living room. I mean, they are completely over the top and really wonderful for this kind of experience. In the evenings, you know, we have boat rides, museum visits, theater, film, concerts. We'll be there for the 14th of July when the fireworks takes place on the Champ de Mars right near campus. We will drink in as much Parisian high culture as we possibly can. And I want to mention in passing that we do offer on the same dates similar programs at Oxford and in Siena, Italy, and that students can mix and match these programs. So we have a lot of students, for example, going to Oxford for session 1 and then coming to Paris, and some going to Siena. And why in that order? I think, don't take this as an insult, Jim, because I know Oxford is near and dear to you, but I think they can only imagine that the weather and the food get better as they go to Italy and France. In any case, we do offer these combinations, and I think we offer a $1,000 deduction or something like that for students who do 2. We have a selective admissions process, and if you're excited about it, you go to our website and you hit the apply button, and it leads you through a very simple admissions process involving putting in a basic family and educational background and a $700 deposit and your course selection. We then confirm that your courses are available and get back to you, hold a space provisionally while we invite you to the next phase of the admissions process, which involves writing a short essay and providing the email contact of 2 teachers who know you well at school. In the case of French courses, one would be a French teacher, the advanced French courses. And it doesn't take us more than probably a week or 10 days to go through that process and come to a decision on your application. I'm sure there are questions about sort of protocols and safety in this day and age. I will only say that over the past 2 years, we've learned a tremendous amount about operating under duress. And in particular, I'm referring to the stress that COVID has brought to us. We have pivoted like we never pivoted before. We have a risk management team that reevaluates and redirects our COVID protocols on a weekly basis. And we are moving more and more towards a scenario where we operate with COVID, in the sense that we, should students test positive, we're hopeful that a 5-day isolation with support from staff will get students to a point where they can jump back into the program, rather than what we previously saw, which was much longer isolation and perhaps even a need to go home or go somewhere else. We really have learned throughout this year with some of our GAP programs and other things that we can coexist with COVID, given some basic precautions, one of which is that we do require that everyone be fully vaccinated and boosted for the program. Happy to answer any of those questions. Our phone number is on the screen at this point, and what we encourage everyone to do is call our office with detailed questions, and we will put you in touch with people who organize the program that interests you, whether it's Paris or Siena or Oxford or anything else that Putney does. Please reach out to us. We love talking to people on the phone, and if you can come by our office for that syrup, even better. We'd love to see you in person. I'm sure there are things we've overlooked. I want to thank you all for bearing with us, and Bob and Jim, thank you so much, especially for joining us. Mike, let's turn it over to you to see if there are any questions to be answered.
Yeah, a lot of great information in there already, but a few questions did come in. Whoever wants to answer these, there is a question about how many students are currently enrolled or how big the program can be overall. And whether, and seminar size as well.
Very good, and we should have touched on it. Thank you. We are limited this year by the fact that the American University of Paris can only designate 1 dormitory for us this year. And it is a dorm that holds 65 people, of which we anticipate 10 being residential staff and 54 being students. So it is a very small and specific number. We are currently in both session A and B somewhere in the mid to high 20s. And traditionally, February 20 is our halfway point, though academia and pre-college applications tend to come a little later. So there's no question both programs will fill. The seminars are very small. They tend to be limited to about 8 to 10 students with a professor, with an instructor.
Great. And do students ever attend both sessions in Paris back to back?
Absolutely, yes. It's a great thing to do. And we're happy to talk to people about recommended course combinations. Jim, do you want to talk about that experience for people you've seen do it elsewhere and in Paris?
Well, sure. And obviously we're looking at, many permutations, and some of the people on this call I may see in Oxford in our program there for one half or the other of the month, but many students will do a double session in Paris, and it's very logical, and they can do it different ways. One is to have a major and a minor in the first session, and then a different major and minor in the second session. So they really explore multiple subjects, but of course they can also make French language central to that development, because of course one doesn't master a language in 2 weeks. So all the language work you might want to do, and you might do some conversational French in one half and do the French cuisine course or the streets of Paris in French in the other half. So again, I think the whole program is built around a student-centered focus, that kids develop their program according to their own priorities and interests.
Great. One clarifying thing, there's a question about, do students need to bring their own spending money for lunch if they're on their own during the program?
Thank you. The answer is yes. It's the one thing we do not cover. And I think we recommend $300 or $350 that should get students through it. There's no reason that lunch in a small cafe or in a market street should need to cost more than 10 or 12 euros. I also want to mention at this point, when people are asking about additional expense, that airfare is not included, but that we do organize a flight from New York that is accompanied by an adult. And we're happy to provide exactly what those flights are. I think it's a direct flight on Delta from JFK to Paris. And we, of course, meet students and transfer them from and back to the airport. We also give a big window where students who wish to travel on their own or with family members can meet us either at the airport in Paris or at the campus.
Great. And just maybe two last questions here. One is just about general safety protocols, students walking together, getting from point A to point B. And along with that, are students allowed to independently explore Paris? And are they allowed to explore Paris after classes in the evenings?
Great. I think I'll probably address this one. This is a super structured program. We keep students, as you could tell from Bob's description of the daily schedule, extraordinarily busy, whether it's in seminars or with speakers who are engaging, who come to campus. We do a college admissions night where the director of admissions at AUP is going to facilitate a conversation about college admissions and international study in particular. So whether it is that afternoon block where we might be picking up a soccer ball and having a soccer game on the Invalides, or that evening presentation where we have a film on campus or a speaker who comes in, it's very unusual that students have a lot of free time. It does happen in that block from, say, 4 or 5 until 6 before dinner, or during that lunchtime block. And our structural guideline at that point is that students may be out on their own. They may, for example, commute, if you will, from their housing to campus, but always in groups of 3 or more. And we have all sorts of safety protocols that we share, contact information for people with cell phones around the city at all times. Students are allowed to explore. In fact, we think it's important that they explore Paris in those groups of 3 or more. And so there is some independence, but it's not likely to be at night sort of wandering the streets of Paris. It's more likely that you might be going to a jazz concert or a movie or something like that, but doing it with an adult who has organized it, and we invite students to join them and pays for it as well. That is all included in the tuition.
Jeff, I'd love to jump in as a parent about, I saw a question in the Q&A about safety in the neighborhood in general. And I'm now speaking as a father of 2 daughters who were raised in New York City, right in the center of New York. As you know, my wife and I live at 109th Street on Riverside Drive, uptown. And our daughters were raised in that neighborhood. So we're very sensitive to the areas that people live in and walk safely in. My older daughter, was 4 years in this neighborhood as a student at AUP, and all 4 years she lived in an apartment by herself, and she walked freely. This is in a city that is far safer than any American city. I think we all know that very well. This is one of the safest and most enjoyable neighborhoods in the entire city of Paris. So I say, as a parent, I had an 18-year-old daughter living in an apartment by herself within walking distance of AUP. And frankly, after we had visited a few times, never had a moment's anxiety about her safety.
It is an extraordinarily comfortable neighborhood to find yourself in. Great.
I think the last thing here, and then we can wrap up. And if anyone else has questions that weren't covered today, as Jeff said, give us a call or an email, and you can speak with us directly. But there is a question about, do you have to attend all of the structured events? And maybe you could touch a little bit on what the independent project is for the seminar.
There are some events that are required, but most importantly, students want to attend them because they are extraordinary people. Jim Basker just referred to Alexis Tadi, who is a senior professor at the Sorbonne, but also a professor at Oxford, who is famous as a scholar of English literature, but also, oddly enough, has this niche that Bob and I talked to him about of having studied sports in literature, and has written about how tennis and soccer and other things appear in literature, and is passionate about the playing of sports, the Olympics, all those things. And when he comes and gives an evening presentation, it won't just be his high academic interpretation of literature. It will be the very practical observations of a person who's dedicated his life to studying sports in literature and in life. So students want to attend these things. They love each other. They enjoy the presenters who we bring in. And it doesn't usually come down to a question of whether or not it's required. I think it's very unusual that we actually head in that direction. People just come because it's engaging and they want to be a part of it. Thank you all for joining us. I'm sure there are things we've missed. Please call us in Vermont to speak further about this. Seminar space will be the first thing that becomes tight, I would say. But generally speaking, there is space in the program. You're welcome to call us and check on seminar space at any time. I want to say special thanks to Mike and Bob and Jim for joining us on this Sunday afternoon. I can only imagine that Bob's actually got his ski boots on right now and will be headed back out on the mountain. And we wish you well. And thank you all so much. It's been terrific.